Hare Krishna. It's wonderful to see everyone again. Okay, let's get started. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradhayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tushe Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyahevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I understand that up to now 434 has been covered, is that correct? So from 435 up to the end of chapter 4 and starting the 5th chapter will be the focus of our class today. So the Vaishnavas in the last session, what were the verses that were covered? Like what were the sequence of verses that were covered in the last class?
Hare Krishna. So we started with 4.12.
Okay. Yep. And you went up to 434. So can you summarize for me, what was it that you learned in those sequence of verses? That's quite a lot of, that's quite a few verses. What were some of the main things that you learned in those verses?
I'm happy to start us off.
Yes, please.
With a summary. So we were looking at the different doers. So we the jiva, so us, material nature, and then Krishna. So we were looking at how, we get confused with who the doer is. So it's the jiva desires to do something, and then material nature facilitates that desire. But Krishna.
Which verse are you looking to right now?
So 4.13.
Okay. So 4.13, how does this deal with okay, fair enough, go on. So what is the emphasis of those three verses, 13, 14, and 15? What is the emphasis of those three verses? The emphasis is not material nature or the jiva, actually. What is the emphasis? There's a comment here. Emphasis on the nature of Krishna's action. Yes, okay. Would you like to elaborate, Mrugank?
I think essentially what we're saying is that he's beyond the modes and he's uninfluenced by those modes. Whereas for other people, when they act, they have to act in a certain way, both internally because they desire something, and then as a consequence, because of their action, they are made to desire something else, or they're affected in a certain way. But Krishna neither desires to act in this world, nor is he affected by the action that he performs.
That's right.
And then the other question that we also spoke about was, if he doesn't desire to act, then why does he act? And then, that can go into, yeah.
That's itself not the emphasis here. That was briefly spoken of in the 3rd chapter. And one should know that from 412 onwards, the topic reverts back to the original context of these first 6 chapters. So I think from basically verse number 4 where Arjuna asks his question about how is it that Krishna instructed Vivaswan. Krishna had spoken a very special sequence of verses. So 4:4 to 4:11 are actually not in the same level as the other verses. They are actually at a higher level, where Krishna is revealing confidential knowledge about himself. He's speaking topics very, very personally about his own glories. And he's emphasizing that one who absorbs his mind in just hearing and chanting his glories is capable of leaving this material world just by hearing and chanting his glories. That's the emphasis there. From 4:12 onwards, the topic somewhat changes. And 4:13 to 4:15, the single point that is emphasized is this, that somebody who knows, only that person who knows that Krishna is truly transcendental to this world can themselves become transcendental to this world. And the pivotal verse here is text 15. Evam jnatva kritam karma purver api mumukshubhi kuru karmaiva tasmatvam purve purvataram kritam. All liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature. Therefore, you should perform your duty with following in their footsteps, i.e. you should understand this aspect of myself and then engage in your prescribed duties for my pleasure with the intent of achieving liberation. Okay, so that's clearly one emphasis, the emphasis of understanding Krishna's transcendental nature and connecting one's service to him. That was one emphasis of that section. What about 4:16 onwards to 4:34 or 4:33 rather? What happens there? What is the essence of that section?
So,
Anybody?
Is understanding the karma on the platform of jnana.
Understanding karma as the?
On the platform of jnana, using the jnana.
As the flag form of jnana?
On the platform of jnana.
On the platform of jnana, okay. Can you emphasize what that means?
We're trying to understand different types of the karma, vikarma, and akarma, okay. And then action, inaction, and inaction.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
Well, action is inaction is it's like a karma accrues even if no physical action is performed.
So that means that if somebody is trying to become free of this material world but stops performing their prescribed duties, they become implicated in sinful activities.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So it's not a path of liberation, okay?
And then inaction means that liberates us from this material nature, which is a devotional service. And even
no, it's not devotional service. This is not devotional service. Is a very specialized form of inaction.
Yeah,
but it's not only speaking about devotional service.
Correct, Prabhuji, correct. And then even in that there are different categories like Nishkama karma yoga and Sakama karma.
Yes, but is Sakam karma what is being spoken of here? What is Sakam karma exactly?
It's like Bhakti Yoga. Sakama karma yoga means
no. Sakam karma and Bhakti Yoga. What is the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga here?
Karma Yoga is we perform the actions and we offer the results to Krishna.
Okay.
And Bhakti Yoga.
Okay. Would someone else like to step in and add to what Prabhuji was saying? Prabhuji, sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Sorry, my name is Srinivas.
Srinivas Prabhu. Okay. Yes, would anybody like to step in and continue Srinivas Prabhu's point? Would the devotees like to turn their video on, if possible? It becomes easier to interact with the Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna. Anybody else? Would anybody like to step in and continue Srinivas Prabhu's point? So what is being spoken of here in terms of what is the difference between karma and bhakti? Karma yoga and bhakti yoga. See, they're both forms of connecting to the Lord. That's implied by the word yoga. Yoga means yug, to connect. So both are forms of connecting to the Lord. What is the difference between connecting to the Lord through karma yoga and connecting to the Lord through bhakti yoga? Can I pick someone at random? Srikanta Sena Prabhu, I'm really sorry. You're first on my screen.
Oh, I'm muted anyway, Prabhu. Would it be the intention in which one performs the practice itself?
So what is the difference in an intention?
So when one performs this, let's start with the straightforward. When one performs bhakti yoga, at least, well, there are stages in bhakti yoga, but the intention, I guess, in bhakti yoga is to perform it with to satisfy the Lord, to please the Lord. And in karma yoga, at least let's think from a sakama karma yoga. One is doing it with the intention of enjoying, but not understanding that the Lord is the one that supplies that enjoyment, or supplies that benefit that one performs, one gets at the end of a sacrifice. And a Nishkama karma yoga doesn't want the benefits, but still wants to perform the acts. Is intending to perform the acts, knowing that, I guess, in one sense, one needs to perform prescribed duties.
Okay, you're almost there, very almost there. How can I have a whiteboard here? I just need to write comments somewhere.
You can just share screen and then choose the whiteboard.
Share screen and whiteboard. Okay, great.
Prabhu, Rohan had a question, I think.
Rohan Prabhu?
Sorry, not a question. Is it just that Bhakti Yoga is directly to please Krishna, while Karma Yoga is more about doing the activities which can be offered to Krishna?
Yes, you're also right.
Yeah.
I think both yourself and Srikanta Sena Prabhu have almost touched the mark. Here's the difference. There are actually two differences: Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Let's write them down first. So first of all, what are the similarities? Both are forms of connecting to Krishna. That's number one. Both require the intention to please Krishna. Basically, any form of connecting to the Lord, whether it's karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, bhakti yoga, whatever form of yoga, if the intention to please the Lord is not there, then you don't get the results of those activities as much as you do if you're trying to please the Lord. Both require the intention. It's like almost, I want to get a paycheck, but to get my paycheck, I need to please my manager at work. So the intention, even in Nishkama karma yoga or sakama, whatever it is, the intention to please the Lord must always be there. All of these processes both require an understanding that Krishna's form is transcendental and is and that he is the ultimate shelter. Both accept and understand that Krishna is the only one who provides the results one seeks. All of this is exactly the same.
So Prabhu, with number 3, when you say form, you're saying physical form?
Yes.
So even a karma yoga needs to be on the worshipping Bhagavan and.
Yes. Do you know what the reference for this is? If you look up chapter 9, look up text number, I believe it's is it 12? I think it's number 12. Moghasha Moga Karmana Moga Jnana Vichetasa. Has everybody got Bhagavad-gītā in front of them? Just see if you can quickly open 9.12. You will see this verse. Moga Asha. Asha means your desires for bhakti. So there are many people around the world who aspire for some level of love for the Lord. But in some traditions, and you will see this in the Kabbalistic tradition, you will see this in some Islamic traditions, you will see this in some of the Vedic traditions, even among some of the saints that are present in India. They aspire for, at least verbally, some level of love for the Lord, but they consider the Lord's form to be not transcendental. So moga asha, moga means confused or baffled, Prabhupada translates it as. Their hopes for bhakti are baffled. Moga karmano. Karmano means any desires that they hope for from their activity. Anything they want of this world, whether they want as simple a thing as a house or a child, they want a position in this world, they want to go to Swarga. Moga karmano. Moga jnana. Jnana means their aspiration for transcendental knowledge and therefore for liberation. Moga jnana vichetasaha. Asurim, so all of these things are baffled. Rakshasim asurim cheva. They attain nothing else but the nature and the destination of asuras and rakshasas, which means a very low and dark place in this world. Prakritim mohinim shritaha. And they're just completely captured within the modes of material nature. And why is Krishna saying this? If you look at verse number 11, here's continuity. Avajananti ma mudha manashim tanumashritam. Those who are foolish in nature, who are mudas, not knowing avajananti, my transcendental nature, param bhavam ajananto. They do not know that my form, that I am completely transcendental to Maya. They think manashim tanumashritam, that when I descend to this world, I have taken shelter, ashrita, of a human-like form, of a human form, manashim tanum. So such people are, in text 12, it is mentioned, are baffled in every endeavor in this world, whether it's for material gain, whether it's liberation, or it's bhakti. It is a fundamental tenet that one has to appreciate Krishna's transcendental position. Now, one may not fully understand Krishna's transcendental position. That's not possible without bhakti. It is not also possible to have that love for Krishna, but one must acknowledge the presence of the Lord, acknowledge his transcendental position, and aim to please him. That is the only way by which anyone can attain any kind of result in this world. That point is also mentioned, by the way, in 4:13 to 4:15 of the 4th chapter. And that's why Krishna is saying that even though I'm the creator of the Varnashrama system, I'm not a part of it. Neither am I affected by any of this. That point has been mentioned also in the 4th chapter. So the 2 points that really emphasize the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, and it is alluded to by both Srikanta Sena Prabhu and Rohan Prabhu, is this: faith and motivation. Those are the two words that characterize the difference. In Karma Yoga, the practitioner, and by the way, one more point that's actually more important here, right after this point here. So let's call it 1A. Both practice Navavida Bhakti. What do I mean by that? Both practitioners, Karma Yoga, and this includes Jnana Yogis, Ashtanga Yogis, it is a requirement from Shastra that they hear and chant Krishna's names. Many of these practitioners worship deities of Radha Krishna or Vishnu or Shalagram Shilas. They study Srimad Bhagavatam also. So in some sense, from an external perspective, the differences appear to be quite subtle, but there are actually important differences. The Karma Yogi does not believe that exclusive practice of Navavida Bhakti is sufficient for perfection. They feel like there's a part of me that needs to have my career. Otherwise, I can't be satisfied. I can't progress. You know, how many of us have had like parents who say, you know, it's not sufficient to practice bhakti. You need to do your duties. You need to, focus on. You need to get married. You need to have this family life. Bhakti is okay, you can keep that in the side, but you need to actually focus on your life. Bhakti is not about running away from the world. You need to embrace your material responsibilities and you need to make that your focus. Bhakti should help you in your material responsibilities. How many of us have heard this from parents or somebody else? So this idea that bhakti is secondary and supportive of our duties in this world, but they feel, I should say, and supportive of our duties in this world. This is what makes a person a karma yogi. They practice bhakti, but they don't have exclusive faith in bhakti. And furthermore, not only do they not have exclusive faith, they feel that bhakti is secondary and supportive of our duties in this world. So that's the faith part. The motivation part is that they do this, they practice what they do. Their intention is to please the Lord for the purpose of, well, from the point of view of the Bhagavad-gītā liberation. The Bhagavad-gītā doesn't really emphasize material gain, but they can also desire material gain. The Bhakti yogi, in reverse, has complete faith that by practicing devotional service, everything is achieved. There is nothing that I need that is separate from my attempts to hear, chant, and serve Krishna for his pleasure. There's nothing more than this. It's not that they don't work, they do work, especially if one is a student or a grihastha, but they don't feel like I need to work for my purification. That's a support for their bhakti. Material prescribed duties are an assistant, if I can spell, assistant to bhakti, and are undertaken for the purpose of establishing a consistent environment wherein bhakti can be easily practiced. This distinction is actually really important to understand. And of course, their motivation, exclusive desire to please Krishna. That has been mentioned before. Now, the reference for this is 9.3. There, Prabhupada provides, I won't go into too much detail, you'll cover it at the right time. But in verse 9.3, you will see in Srila Prabhupada's purport that there are two verses that Prabhupada quotes to define what pure bhakti is. One of them, he just provides a translation, and the other one, he provides the verse. So if you go to, does everybody have Bhagavad-gītā with them? Please open the 9.3 purport. And you will see that in the first paragraph, Srila Prabhupada says, can everybody let me know when they've reached the right purport? Yeah, all good. Okay, so first paragraph, Srila Prabhupada writes, somewhere I think 5th or 6th line. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that faith is the complete conviction that simply by serving the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, one can achieve all perfection. I just need to serve Krishna. There's nothing else I need to do. Anything else is extraneous, and it is only supportive of this main attempt at bhakti. That is called real faith. Then Prabhupada quotes another verse, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I won't read the Sanskrit, but the importance of this verse is to say that just as by watering the root of a tree, all the branches, leaves, and twigs are automatically nourished, and simply by putting food in the stomach, all the senses, mind, intelligence are automatically nourished. Similarly, by serving the Supreme Lord, every other process, every other personality, every other object in this world is automatically satisfied. A person who has this depth of faith does not believe that serving a specific cause, extraneous or independent of bhakti, I should say, is necessary. You will not get such a devotee separately distributing food, creating shelters. They will understand that all of these things are included within devotional service. For example, through the distribution of prasadam, or through the creation of ashrams where people can come, hear and chant, find shelter. They understand that if I can transform the consciousness of a person, connect them to the Lord, automatically every other problem in the world will be satisfied. And in reverse, every problem that I have in my life, personal, social, etc., family, etc., it is because I am not chanting properly. It's because I am not following the instructions of my master, of my spiritual master, or of the Lord. If I just can focus on their instructions, if I can become a better devotee, the problems I'm having in my marriage, the problems I'm having at work, all of these things can be actually filled. And it's not just a superficial understanding. They really deeply see the connection between the problems and their practice of bhakti and their consciousness. And this is what characterizes the practice of Bhakti Yoga. So if I had to describe this in one line, here is the one line. Karma yogis identify with their body and mind, and only partially identify as a servant of Krishna. Their sense of I and mine revolves around this world. But for the Bhakti Yogi, and I have to maybe create a new text here. Text. For the Bhakti Yogi, they identify as a servant of Krishna. Their sense of I and mine is I am a servant of Krishna, and only Krishna is mine. This is their very strong conviction. So what this means is that apart from service to Krishna, I have nothing else. There's nothing else that I can do, want to do, I'm willing to do. This is the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. And this difference has to be very clearly understood in understanding what is happening in this section in comparison to what's happening with devotees. Okay. So let's go back to text number 6. Was this clear, by the way? Do any of the Vaishnavas have any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yep.
So this identity of a karma yogi that you've defined here, is that only in the beginning stages of karma yoga, or even when they're perfected, they still don't really identify?
Well, the thing is that the fact that even in the later stages of their practice, they're still focused on dealing with their mind and their intelligence. The Jnana Yogi uses their intelligence to, in an abstract way, meditate upon the Lord. And the Ashtanga Yogi uses their mind. They're still dealing with their own conditioning as their focus. They're still focused on themselves. But the devotee doesn't need to do that. For them, it's like, for the devotee, just like a mother serves a child. Because there's a sense of there's a strong sense of identification with the child. This is my child. And the child's happiness automatically constitutes the mother's happiness. So similarly, for the devotee, they begin by having this very strong attachment to their spiritual master, and it expands by virtue of that initial identification to the Lord. They just serve the Lord, and they understand that Krishna is going to protect me. Whatever he wants for me, that's what's going to happen. Pure devotees don't worry so much about their personal purification. That just happens automatically. They don't worry about having to specifically cultivate a particular kind of knowledge. Their focus is to cultivate their conviction in devotional service and to keep hearing and chanting about Krishna to strengthen and grow their convictions. And by that practice, Krishna automatically takes care of them. And there are verses in the middle 6 chapters of the Gita that emphasize this point.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. So I'll just clear this. Can I clear this if that's okay? Yeah. Okay. So,
sorry, Prabhu, I should have, it came to me as you cleared it, but anyway, I'll ask it. So would that mean that those devotees who are beginning their Bhakti Yoga path and don't have that sense of, I am a servant of Krishna? I mean, I don't believe I have that. And I don't feel like I'm there. Perhaps this is a point for later chapters, but does that mean essentially that I am then just practicing a glorified form of karma yoga?
No, it depends on where the majority of your faith is. If the majority of your faith is in bhakti and some of your faith is in prescribed duties, it means that there is a mixture. It's called mixed devotional service. You're still a bhakti yogi, but a mixed devotee. The reason the karma yogi is called a karma yogi rather than a bhakta, even though they perform devotional service, is because they consider bhakti to be secondary to everything else. I'm pretty sure that nobody here thinks that. Everybody here understands that what I'm doing in this world is secondary to bhakti. And so therefore bhakti is, because it's more prominent, everybody here is considered a devotee. Now, the distinction between a mixed devotee and a pure devotee is the emphasis on that exclusivity of faith in devotional service and that strength of identity. By the way, that strength of identity is what defines pure devotional service. And so that identity, it can be there right from the very, very beginning, the moment you walk through the door. Do you remember when you first came to Krishna consciousness and you first felt that enthusiasm in like dancing in kirtan, and you heard that wonderful class and you were like, yes, this is it. I don't need anything else. That enthusiasm that you had, that is the seed of pure devotional service. And that's how it begins. The problem is that over time, we hear and allow our consciousness to become mixed with other concerns and other aspects in this world. So we start working, we start hearing others, and we start diluting our emphasis on pure hearing and chanting. But if devotees come in and they feel that enthusiasm by the mercy of Vaishnavas, and they continue hearing and chanting purely, that faith does not need to be diluted. It can just keep growing and become purer and purer and purer. And the difference is that those who are mixed devotees, they attain the 4 kinds of liberation above impersonal liberation. It's only those who are pure devotees who attain a relationship with Krishna and the 4 rasas, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. Others do not. That's spoken of in the middle 6 chapters. And so therefore, our entire process actually, the purpose of the Bhagavad-gītā in the middle 6 chapters and in the last 6 chapters is to provide us the understanding and the tools by which we can purify our faith. That pure hearing and chanting of those chapters, it helps us purify our faith and focus it on the Lord in such a way that we can attain pure bhakti and therefore attain that intimate relationship with him.
Thanks, Prabhu.
Thank you for the question. I recognize we've used up like half an hour or more on this, but I hope that was helpful. And it's an important distinction to keep in mind. Okay, so from 4:16 onwards, the topic, I mean, it's already reverted, but the topic becomes focused on, we once spoke of this several weeks ago, that in the Vedas, you have these terms, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, right? So dharma refers to following the instructions of the Lord in dealing with this material world. So you can say prescribed duties, as spoken of in scriptures. And when this dharma is performed for artha and kama, this is called, as has been mentioned, sakama karma yoga. It's still performed for the pleasure of the Lord. It's accompanied by the chanting or the remembrance of the Lord. When performed for moksha or liberation, what this means is when performed for moksha, meaning for initially purification of heart. Purification of heart. Then this practice is called Nishkama Karma Yoga. And the emphasis of these verses in the 4th chapter, from 4:16 onwards to 4:33, is to say that when you practice Nishkama Karma Yoga, that is prescribed duties for the purpose of moksha, then what actually comes up is knowledge of one's inherent knowledge. One's inherent knowledge. This phrase "inherent" is important, because what it says is that this knowledge, okay, I tried to make it bold, it didn't work. Okay, sorry, I've done something wrong. Yeah, what is stated is that this knowledge is actually inherent in us. We already understand our spiritual nature, but this has become covered. Which verses in the 3rd chapter speak of this covering?
338, 337.
Yeah. So if you look at that verse, there's this verse that says, just as smoke covers fire, dust covers a mirror, and an embryo, a womb covers an embryo, similarly, lust can cover the knowledge of the spirit soul. So this is, as Mrugank Prabhu said, 338. So it indicates that one's inherent knowledge, it's not new knowledge, which is somehow or the other being injected into the spirit soul. That's not the idea. It's an inherent knowledge of our spiritual nature. And that inherent knowledge has become covered by the process of Nishkama Karma Yoga. That covering is removed. And what this means is that the mode of ignorance is gradually transformed, or passion is gradually transformed to goodness, wherein one's inherent knowledge is visible. There is still, by the way, covering. There is still a covering, which is why Nishkama Karma Yogis are still conditioned souls. They're still in this world, and they have to perfect their practice. And we will come to that in chapter 5 and 6. But the point is that their covering is being removed. And that is what is emphasized in chapter 4, from text 16 onwards to 33. So what is spoken of is that that covering is removed and one's inherent knowledge comes to the fore. And what it says is that the actual nature of the prescribed duties performed don't matter. You can be situated anywhere on the Varnashrama ladder. But according to whether one's a brahmachari, a grihastha, or whatever, if one's a doctor, one's a sweeper on the street, one is married or unmarried, one is, or maybe one should say in Kali Yuga, one is remarried 10 times. It doesn't matter. There are certain prescribed duties that one has. And if one follows those prescribed duties for the pleasure of the Lord, in desiring internal purification of heart rather than the immediate benefits of performing those activities, then one's covering is removed, one's karma is destroyed, and one's inherent knowledge comes to the fore. One is brought to the status of the mode of goodness. And when that happens, one transcends when one's covering is removed and one's inherent knowledge is brought to the fore. One's identification with matter is destroyed. What this means is I no longer identify as a doctor, husband, wife, I don't know, what are the identifications are there? As a charity worker, for want of a better word, philanthropist, nationalist, etc. All of these designations are removed. And what that means is I no longer have to do this. I no longer have to engage in these activities, or I engage in these activities without attachment for the benefit of others, i.e., to set an example. Which verses in the 3rd chapter speak of this?
Around 23, 24-ish.
Yeah, and also 3:16, which speaks of this base. 3:16 emphasizes how when one Atma Ratir eva syad, if you look at that verse, just open 3:16. Oh no, wait, sorry, not 3:16, sorry, 3:26 maybe. 3:17, sorry, that's right. So here, look at this verse. Yastva Atma Ratir eva syad Atma Triptascha Manava. That means the coverings have been removed and one's inherent knowledge comes to the fore and one begins to taste one gets a taste of one's inherent spiritual nature at that time. And that's why these phrases, Atma Ratir, one takes pleasure in the Atma. Atma Triptas, one takes satisfaction in the Atma. Chamanava, Atman Eva cha Santushtas, one is only satisfied with Atma. Tasya Karyam Navidite. For him, there's no more prescribed duties because he's no longer attached. He no longer wants to engage in material activity. So therefore, the Vedas don't need to prescribe duties for him any longer. And that is the stage that is being spoken of in chapter 4. What is stated in those verses is that by the proper practice of Nishkama Karma Yoga, so Nishkama Karma is considered to be like, it's considered to be a form of hidden jnana. Our acharyas explain it is like jnana hidden within the womb of karma. It's actually jnana yoga. And by practicing of Nishkama karma, by the performance of prescribed duties for liberation, the jnana component is manifest in one's heart, or it is revealed within one's heart. Is this part okay? Does anybody have any questions on this point? And that verse, which sounds a little bit tricky, action in inaction and inaction in action. All that's saying is, if you want to be free of this world, there is only a very narrow path that one has to follow. One has to perform action. Only in a particular kind of action will there truly be inaction. That's what it's saying. Only in acting in a particular kind of way through Nishkama Karma Yoga in this world will you avoid implication. That's what the meaning of that phrase is. Whereas if one is trying to avoid all kinds of activity, oh, I don't want to be involved, I don't want to, get things too complicated, which is quite a common phrase nowadays. I don't know, I'm hearing that a lot from a lot of people. I want to keep things simple. I don't want to get too involved. I don't want to, get emotionally implicated here. So that avoidance of prescribed duties is actually sinful and will cause one to be further implicated in this particular world. And the keynote of that section is this verse 420. Where is that verse? Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir. Is that 424?
24.
So this verse actually is, so 23 and 24 should be understood to be keynotes of that section, where when one is situated in transcendental, 23 says, if one is situated in transcendental knowledge, all of the prescribed activities that one performs automatically become achieve a transcendental nature. And verse 24 says, when one has transcendental knowledge, so it's not just cultivating, when one has transcendental knowledge, if one seeks out the Supreme Lord through that transcendental knowledge, then every one of one's activities automatically become transcendental. These verses should be understood to be a keynote. Some commentators actually call chapter 4 Brahmarpana Yoga, from 424. Okay, before we move on, do the Vaishnavas have any questions, or can we just clear the screen and go on? Was anything that I said or that we discussed confusing, or was it helpful? Was it a helpful repetition? Yes.
Prabhu, there is one question.
Yes. Is that Sharon, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Prabhu, like you said that nowadays people think, and I think I fall in that category too, that you want to make things simple. I don't want to get too much involved in too many things. I seeing less and less relevance in that. But if you continue that, wouldn't that be kind of sort of running away? I'm doing inaction, and hence.
No, you have to understand what are the instructions for you. See, you are you are connected to Srila Prabhupada. You might also be connected to a spiritual master. Your spiritual master has given you clear instructions. You're in a family. You have certain responsibilities to maintain your Vaishnava family. So more than duties for Vaishnavas, they've been given services. You have your direct service to the Lord, which is hearing and chanting about the Lord. And then you have a service to maintain your Vaishnava family and facilitate Krishna consciousness for your Vaishnava family. So you have to ascertain, based on my spiritual master's instructions, what are the services that I need to perform? And one focuses on those services. When you say you want to simplify things, where that becomes relevant is, I want to simplify my life so that I can focus on my spiritual master's instructions. If simplification means neglecting certain instructions, that's a problem. So if one thinks simplification means that I don't need to so much worry about my children's education, that's an issue, because that's a service that one has. One has taken up family responsibilities. One has invited a servant of the Lord to come as one's child. And that means that one has been designated a caretaker for that child of the Lord by the Lord, one's spiritual master. And so one has certain services to fulfill, and one does not fulfill those services, one is held accountable and responsible. Does that answer your question, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
And more, if you go to the general category of transcendentalists, the way they would ascertain how to simplify their life is to focus on the recommendations of Shastra and their guru. So their guru and Shastra tell them certain prescribed duties. As a Kshatriya, there are certain prescribed duties. Or to be more, to make it contemporarily relevant, if one is a police officer or an army man, there are certain responsibilities that one has, and one of them is to be prepared to give up one's life to protect others. And if one runs away from if one is in the army or one is a police officer and one runs away, I'm talking about the general transcendentalist. A devotee's life is far too valuable, and it needs to be guided in terms of how they utilize their life by their spiritual master. But I'm talking about the general transcendentalist. For the general category of individual, if they run away from battle at that time, then they're considered to be as sinful as a teacher of Vedic life, or like an acharya turning away from scripture. It is considered to be as sinful as that.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Okay, shall we move on? Is there others messages? I'm sorry, I'm not checking the messages here. Am I supposed to? Okay, not just parents. Okay, let me know if there's a message, because I'm not accustomed to looking at chats. I know that that's how a lot of the devotees here communicate. But just let me know directly if you have a comment or a question that you want me to address. Okay, so the end of the fourth chapter is actually relatively simple. So it starts with 434, and it progresses up to the very end, which I think is like 43 or something. The 42nd verse, sorry. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. The point being emphasized is quite simple. Here, the glories of this inherent knowledge coming to the fore are being expressed. Before then, I understand you've covered 434. The importance, have you discussed 434 in detail? In which case, I won't go into this verse.
But just Prabhuji mentioned that we need to still discuss the last 2 points and 434, Prabhuji.
Which are the last 2 points?
It's like Tattva Darshinaha.
Okay.
We discussed about the Pranipatena and Pariprashnena, and then Sevaya.
Okay.
The 3 points we discussed probably, yes.
Okay, fine. So there are then two things to discuss. One is tad vidhi. What does this tad vidhi mean? So Prabhupada here translates it as that knowledge of different sacrifices. There's another important meaning of tad vidhi. Tad vidhi means one who knows the Lord. The reason this any spiritual master of any transcendental life has to know the Lord has already been mentioned. Because Krishna has said in 4:13 to 15 that one has to know that I'm situated above matter, that I am transcendental in order to achieve any kind of success in this process, because liberated souls in the past have followed this method. And he's encouraging Arjuna to follow what other liberated souls have done. Also, if you look at 2.12, if you can just open Bhagavad-gītā, this is the verse, Natva evaham jatu nasham, natvam neme janadita. One should know that this verse, it's not just saying that you're a spirit soul, right? And Krishna has somehow, you'd think that a more complicated instruction like this would be provided after a simpler instruction is given, right? Like you are a spirit soul, I'm a spirit soul, and we are all eternally spirit souls. You'd think that that would be a sequence. But Krishna is saying, no, wait, hang on. We are all first different. We are always different. We've always been different. We always will be different. And clearly we're different now. So that's what Krishna is saying. And then he says, you should know that the spirit soul is eternal, etc., etc. The intention of 12.12, our acharyas say, is to emphasize eternal difference, to suggest that bhakti is eternal, both in practice and in perfection. And the spiritual master has to know this point. He has to not only know that the disciple is a pure spirit soul and guide the disciple on the activities of a pure spirit soul, but he also has to know the Lord and allow the disciple to connect to the Lord. So tad vidhi means the spiritual master has to have knowledge of the Lord, has to have knowledge of the spirit soul, and has to have knowledge of how to engage the disciple in connection with the Lord according to the disciple's qualification. So in the context of these verses, the spiritual master has to at least know that the Lord is transcendental. As a spirit soul, you practice Nishkama Karma Yoga, and this is how you connect your practice to the Lord. That's what's indicated. For pure devotional service, tad vidhi means that one has to understand Krishna as Bhagavan. One has to appreciate his eternal pastimes, and one has to train a disciple to walk the path of surrender, to take up pure bhakti and connect to the Lord in that way. Now the phrase tattva darshana is indicated in this verse. Can somebody go on Google and just open up this verse? Tad vigyartam sagurum evapi gachet samit pani shrotiyam brahmanishtam. The tattva darshana is explained here in the last part of this verse. Has anybody got it open? Would you like to share your screen if you would, if you can? Has somebody got it open?
Prabhu, you want it on Veda base?
Yeah, anything is fine, as long as it's there. Okay, so here's the verse that addresses what this Tattva Darshana means. So this Katha Upanishad verse says, Tad Vigyartam, so one who knows the absolute truth, Sa Gurum, such a spiritual master, Eva Abhigachet, one should approach him. And there's a phrase that Prabhupada doesn't quite quote here. Sorry, it's not Katha Upanishad, it's either Mundaka Upanishad, I think it's Mandukya actually. So then, Sagurum Evabi Gachet, Samit Pani, carrying firewood in hand, meaning that one should not go empty-handed before the spiritual master. And then the qualification of the spiritual master is mentioned. Shrotiyam Brahmanishtam. And here's what Prabhupada says. This Shrotiyam means that one who is coming in disciplic succession, meaning that he has heard properly and is able to convey the message of the parampara. He's able to convey the message of the Lord. His speaking is as if Krishna is speaking himself. That is indicated by the phrase Shrotiyam. What this also means is that the spiritual master is able to clarify the intellectual doubts of the disciple and help the disciple surrender to the Lord. That is indicated by the word Shrotiyam. That is one of the two phrases that explain Tattva Darshana. The second phrase is Brahmanishtam. So Prabhupada here says Brahmanishtam means that he's fully convinced by the supreme absolute truth. This is not it. Brahmanishtam means, Nishtam means to be fixed. He's fixed in the absolute truth. What this means is that when the spiritual master prays for the disciple, Krishna bestows his mercy. This is what it means to be Tattva Darshana. It is not necessary for the spiritual master to have prema bhakti, but the spiritual master must be able to clear the intellectual doubts of the disciple and invoke the mercy of the Lord upon the disciple. These two qualifications together define who is qualified to be a spiritual master. There are many Vaishnavas who are capable of removing our doubts, but their connection to the Lord is not such that by their prayers they can invoke the Lord's blessings and remove the obstacles in our spiritual life. So that kind of shelter is not recommended. And similarly, there are many devotees who are wonderful practitioners, but at the same time, if they are unable to remove the doubts in the disciple's heart, the problem is that the disciple will not know how to take shelter of the Lord. And so therefore, such devotees often direct such a sincere soul to someone else who can give such proper instruction. This does not mean that one has to be a scholar, by the way. See, Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj initiated Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. That example is quite often given. But the thing is that by their teachings, they have to be able to convince the disciple that surrender to the Lord is the goal of life. And just by practicing bhakti, every other perfection will be achieved. They have to be able to convince a disciple of this point. It could be with their example, it could be with their words, it could be somehow or the other. They give the disciple that conviction in their intelligence, in their heart. And that's what's indicated by the phrase Shrotiyam. With Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, actually, he was very, very learned. It may not have been that he would quote necessarily the Upanishads, but he would just say a few sentences, but they would be the essence of the understanding of scripture. Anybody who's actually, by the way, read some of the things that he said will understand what I'm saying. With just two sentences, he would address a person's doubt. He would point out fault in a pretender. He would get to the core of an issue and just address it. So that's what's meant by Shrotiyam and Brahmanishtam. Is that okay? Or do the Vaishnavas have any other questions? So for transcendental knowledge or for devotional service, one needs a spiritual master. And so Krishna is saying, you can, thank you, Tarun Prabhu. Oh, sorry, thank you, Srikanta Prabhu, for sharing that. Krishna is saying here, I have spoken to you now about the performance of prescribed duties, which will purify your heart and awaken your inherent knowledge. But know that this process has to start by taking shelter of a spiritual master who has heard in a disciplic succession, and so therefore is able to remove your doubts and is able to fix your mind and intelligence in this process. And number two, by their prayers, they can invoke my mercy upon you. In that way, you can progress. And the way to engage with such a spiritual master is indicated with those three phrases. Pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. Pranipatena means with an attitude of submission. Pariprashnena means to use one's intelligence to make intelligent and proper inquiries. And sevaya means to have an attitude of service. The core of one's questions, the actual, whatever one's questions may be, the underlying question is, how can I serve you? If that is your underlying question, then every other question is suitable and appropriate. That's the intention conveyed by that verse. A contrary example of this was what I did with my grandfather. I would go to him just to, spend time with him, and I would ask him, so, Tata, what is this? What is this over here? He would say, that's an air conditioner. And oh, is that so? What does a conditioner mean? He would then say, a conditioner means, that your air is coming in, you have a filter, and I would look for just a single word in any of the sentences that he uttered, and I would query that word, not to hear what he was saying, but just almost to irritate him. So I'd ask, what is this? What is a conditioner? What is a filter? And then, what does this mean? Or what does that mean? Eventually, after some time, he would just yell and ask for my father to take me away from there. So this kind of stupid, useless inquiry is not recommended, where one is asking questions just for the sake of asking questions without the intention of, without the real desire to transform one's heart, without the real desire to hear and imbibe those instructions. Such inquiry is not recommended, actually. Although I have to say I had a lot of fun. Okay, so text 35 onwards, and we will cover these verses quite quickly. Let's see. Yeah. We'll read the Sanskrit, and then we can ask one of the Vaishnavas to read the translation. Yajñatva na punarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutani yasheshani drakshasi hatmani hato mai. Would someone like to read the translation?
Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge, you will see that all the living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine.
So this verse describes the result of realizing the knowledge given by Guru. I guess by obtaining this knowledge and by practicing it properly, one is able to see that one is able to perceive Krishna's shelter and see that everything is situated within the Lord, and then Krishna is situated within everything. That is the ultimate result of this knowledge. Now, this is important, and that's indicated by this phrase, Yena bhutani asheshani drakshasi atmani atomai. Atmani, it's situated in me, atomai, or in other words, that they are mine, that they belong to me, that they're situated within me. By implication, I am also situated within them. This applies both to the devotee and to the transcendentalist. The devotee is able to see Krishna in everybody's heart directly, and they're able to see everybody as a servant of Krishna. The Nishkama karma yogi is able to perceive Paramatma in everybody's heart. This is indicated later on with phrases such as Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmani Gavihastini. I believe that's in either chapter 14 or 15. I don't remember exactly. So Srila Prabhupada continues. So Srila Prabhupada says, and I'm just reading a selection of this purport, 518, thank you. And I'm just reading a selection of the purport. One can acquire, I'm reading towards the very end of this purport, one can acquire such pure knowledge only from the bona fide spiritual master, and thereby avoid the delusion that the living entity is equal to Krishna. Perfect knowledge is that the Supreme Soul, Krishna, is a supreme shelter for all living entities. And giving up such shelter, the living entities are deluded by the material energy, imagining themselves to have a separate identity. Thus, under different standards of material identity, they become forgetful of Krishna. When, however, such deluded living entities become situated in Krishna consciousness, that is, they're able to see Krishna in everything. That's what it means to be Krishna conscious. It is to be understood that they're on the path of liberation as confirmed in the Srimad Bhagavatam, etc. Okay, so text 36. Api chedasi papebhya sarvebhya papakrittamaha sarvam jnana plape naiva prijinam santarishyati. Santarishyasi. Someone like to read the translation?
Even if you're considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. Thank you.
So the thing is that the reason for sin is basically a false sense of identity. Is that not true? When you very strongly identify with your body and mind, your inclination to perform activities to satisfy your body and mind under any condition, including sinful activities, is more likely or prominent. But if your heart is purified, then your inclination to perform those sinful activities, no matter how sinful one originally was, that inclination is removed. But one should also know, actually, that without becoming an unalloyed servant of the Lord, the fundamental aversion that one has towards the Lord is never fully removed. And so therefore, it is possible even for the Jivan Mukta to fall down again into material existence if they neglect the Lord. This is explained in a scripture called the Vasana Samhita. There it is stated that even a liberated soul in this world, if when they see a Ratha Yatra come by, if they don't get up and follow the Ratha cart, at that instant they become a conditioned soul again. A liberated soul can never give up the service of the Lord, can never give up the respect of the Lord. In fact, the definition of liberated soul is one who takes pleasure in glorifying the Lord. But the point I mentioned in this verse is, the moment one acquires transcendental knowledge and the coverings are removed, then one's inclinations are automatically taken away. So therefore, the sin itself has no meaning in one's life. Text 37. Yate dhamsi sammidognir bhashmasat kurute jana jnanagni sarva karmani bhasmasat kurute tata. Translation.
As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities.
This verse continues the point mentioned in the previous verse. There's no additional specific point needed to be noted here. Text 38. Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate tat swayam yoga samsiddha kale natmani vindati. Translation.
In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism. One who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time.
By the way, note this phrase, in this world, there's nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. The point is that bhakti is not of this world. It is from the internal energy of the Lord. So bhakti is more purifying and it is still more sublime. But within the context of this world, transcendental knowledge, one's inherent knowledge of one's spiritual nature, there's nothing more purifying than this. Okay, text 39. Shraddhava labhate jnanam tatpara samyatendriyah jnanam labdva param shantim achirenadi gacchati. Translation.
A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Thank you, Prabhuji.
So this verse describes three qualities that are necessary for perfection. That is Shraddhavan, Tatpara, and Samyatendriya. So Shraddhavan means one has to be faithful in this process. One has to be convinced. If I follow this process, I will achieve perfection. That is indicated. Tatpara, meaning that one is dedicated to this practice. It's not just that it's not an on and off thing. It's a continuous, serious, dedicated endeavor. That's indicated by the phrase tatparaha. One is dedicated to the process. And samyatendriyaha. One has discipline and one has controlling one's senses. See, one can have faith, one can have the intention to dedicate oneself to the process. But if one does not control one's senses can take one away. So these three qualities put together allow one to really give oneself to the process in a consistent way so that one can achieve that perfection. And it has to start with that with control senses, one regularly dedicates oneself to the process and cultivates that strong faith, both through Shastra and personal experience, that this process will result in success. Now, it should be noted that throughout many of these purports, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes how through Krishna consciousness, one can attain perfect knowledge. If you read these purports, the point that Srila Prabhupada explains as perfect knowledge is one's identity as an eternal servant of Krishna. Has anybody else noted this in these purports? Yeah. So this is actually the perspective of what real knowledge is from a devotional sense. It is different from the experience of the gradual practitioner, where they experience a sense that they are an eternal spirit soul. They understand that they're dependent upon the Lord, but this mood of I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, Krishnera Nityadas, that sense of I'm eternally meant to serve Krishna, that is manifest more in the devotee. And when in a devotee, this understanding arises, I'm a servant of Krishna, then automatically any engagement that they have in this world becomes focused on what Krishna wants, and their sinful activities automatically fall aside. So that's the point Prabhupada is making, and it's an application for us for this particular section. I want to show you something. Can somebody open Nectar of Devotion, the preface, and just share their screen? There's a very, very, very important section here in the preface where Prabhupada emphasizes the importance of identifying as a servant of Krishna. It's a little different from what the gradual practitioner experiences, but because Srila Prabhupada emphasizes it in the purport, I think it's worthwhile just having a look at. Yeah, just scroll down. It's towards the end. Or maybe actually it's an introduction, sorry. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. Yeah, so go to the very end, the last paragraph. Yeah. So here is the last two paragraphs. Here's what Srila Prabhupada says. Srila Rupa Goswami has also quoted a definition for pure devotional service from the Narada Pancharatra as follows. One should be free from all material designations and by Krishna consciousness must be cleansed of all material contamination. He should be restored to his pure identity in which he engages his senses in the service of the proprietor of the senses. And here's Srila Prabhupada's comment. So when our senses, actually not yet, sorry. So when our senses are engaged for the actual proprietor of the senses, that is called devotional service. In our conditioned state, our senses are engaged in serving these bodily demands. When the same senses are engaged in executing the order of Krishna, our activities are called bhakti. Now here is the important comment that I wanted to emphasize. As long as one identifies himself as belonging to a certain family, a certain society, or a certain person, he is said to be covered with designations. When one is fully aware that he does not belong to any family, society, or country, but is eternally related to Krishna, that person then realizes that his energy should be employed not in the interests of so-called family, society, or country, but in the interests of Krishna. This is purity of purpose and the platform of pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness. So this paragraph should almost be like memorized verbatim if possible, because it's really the foundation of what enables pure devotional service. Developing the sense of identity is the topic of the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-gītā, by the way. But that will be spoken of later. Text number 14. Agyascha shraddadhanascha samshayatma vinashyati nayam lokosti na paro na sukham samshayatmanaha. Translation.
But ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next.
Yeah. So in the previous verse, 3 phrases were emphasized. in terms of achieving perfection or success in this process. Similarly, in text 40, 3 phrases are emphasized that act as roadblocks to achieving this point. The first is agyas, second is ashraddhana, third is samshayatma. So agya means one is ignorant. One does not have sufficient knowledge in order to engage in this process. So we need to understand that we are a spirit soul. We need to very clearly understand the eternal distinction between the Lord and the jiva. We need to very clearly understand that Nishkama Karma Yoga means our prescribed duties in scripture. So I can't do anything which is not in scripture. I have to follow scripture. So one has to be conversant with the activities recommended in Shastra. Following those recommendations in Shastra, one has to know how to properly engage in those activities so that they're pure enough to be offered to the Lord. And one has to offer it to the Lord. So if one is missing in any one of these parts, like there are many transcendentalists who don't understand that Krishna is himself transcendental. They don't understand that one's activities need to be connected to the Lord. How many of us have, by the way, heard, people say, I'm a karma yogi, and that means that I'm doing my duties well? It's basically nonsense, because they don't have proper knowledge of what they're doing. They don't understand that karma yoga means for the pleasure of the Lord. And so their process is set up for failure. And that's indicated by the word agya. They're ignorant, and they need to be properly educated. If they really want to do what they're doing, they need to study the Bhagavad-gītā and learn how to do what they want to do. Ashraddhana, that's a direct corollary to what was mentioned in the previous verse. One has to have faith in the spiritual master. One has to have faith in the process. Now, what this means, it is very, very natural in the beginning. Like, who here, as soon as the day you come into Krishna consciousness, will be prepared to, shave one's head, put on dhoti kurta, give one's entire life savings to the temple, and start practicing devotional service? That's not you can't jump from 0 to 100 very quickly. The idea is Shraddhavan means that one has faith in Shastra and the spiritual master, and one follows those instructions with faith. If it's not to say that one should not ask questions, it's not to say that one may not have doubts, but if after hearing the spiritual master, if after studying the scriptures, if one still is not fully convinced, then one's practice will have some obstacles. And then one needs to continue one's inquiry and study in order to remove that particular obstacle. But it's also important to know that through practice and through the experiences one gets in one's practice, one's faith will gradually strengthen over time also. So this phrase does not indicate that one should have 100% faith to begin with, but at least one should begin with this faith, that my spiritual master is speaking for my benefit. And what he says is actually truly, it's far more important, and it's far more, what I mean to say is I cannot just trust what my mind is saying over what my spiritual master is saying. My spiritual master's words are far more important than what my mind is telling me. And I need to follow those instructions, whether I like it or not. That level of faith one needs to have. And then as one engages in the process, one's faith naturally grows with time. Samshayatma means doubts. That's the third obstacle. What that means is that despite hearing everything, despite having faith in Shastra, one feels, if I practice this, will I personally get this result? I am so fallen. I am so low. Will Krishna really be merciful to me? What a devotee is naturally feeling in need of mercy, but they also have a tremendous amount of confidence in the spiritual master and the Lord. The Lord will be merciful. The Lord will personally give me the results that I'm after. So the word Shraddha applies to the process, and Samshaya here refers to the mercy that one is personally expecting. One should be confident Krishna will take care of me. Krishna will give me what I need. Krishna will give me the result. I just need to serve. That's all. And this applies both for the gradual practitioner and for the devotee. Okay. Text 41. Yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana sanchinna samshayam atmavantam na karmani nibandhanti dhananjaya. Translation. Would someone who's not read yet like to read? Alex, would you like to read?
Was that text 40, sorry?
Text 41.
41, yep. One who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his action, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus, he is not bound by the reactions of work, a conqueror of riches.
Thank you. So the phrase yoga sanyasta karmanam indicates the practice of Nishkama karma yoga. So through the proper practice, yoga sanyasta karmanam, through the proper practice of karma yoga, jnana sanchinna samshayam, one's doubts, through one's experiences, one's doubts and any remainder of confusion or doubt, that's removed. Jnana sanchina. Sanchina means it cuts. Through the gradual awakening of one's inherent knowledge, these doubts are cut apart. And atmavantam na karmani. Atmavantam means one is situated in one's own spiritual nature. One identifies as an eternal spirit soul, dependent upon the Lord eternally. And na karmani nibandhanti. In that stage, there's no karma which affects oneself. And Arjuna's Attain is called Dhananjaya in this particular verse. So last verse of this 4th chapter, tasmad. So this phrase tasmad is like a therefore. It's like a concluding statement after the previous statements are made. So whenever you see the word tasmad in scripture, you should know this to be like a summary statement, almost like a conclusion. It's an emphasis. And this verse is really powerful. Krishna's he's bringing together all of the statements that he has spoken, and he is inspiring, driving Arjuna to action. Tasmada jnana sambhutam hritstam jnana sinatmanaha chitvainam samshayam yogam atishta uttishta bharata. Translation would, who has not read? Mrunal, Prabhu, would you like to read? Or is it Mrunal, Prabhu or Mataji?
That's okay, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. Hare Krishna.
The phrase atishta and uttishta are really striking. Atishta means be situated, be fixed in this knowledge. Uttishta, stand up, Arjuna, stop slouching. Many people consider knowledge to be like armchair philosophy. Generally, when you hear, by the way, I've got a question for you. When you hear of somebody, when you hear somebody being called a scholar, what is the immediate impression that arises in your mind? PhD, which means what? Like, what is the physical image of the person that arises in your mind?
They got glasses and they read a lot of books.
Okay, so does that mean that they kind of works in a uni, writes research papers? Okay, and what about a scholar of scripture? Critical thinking, sits in front of a wall of books. Okay, fair enough. And what about one who's considered to be a scholar in scriptures? What's your image of such a person? Dhoti, bald. Nice. Nice. Because the hair falls out after so much study and late nights, right? Go on. Understands ancient languages. Okay. Bad critical thinking praised by the villagers. What does that mean?
Like, like the impression of like so-and-so Pandit was the Pandit of mathematics in India, and then you take a look at their works and they're not like compared to the other mathematicians of this time, they aren't even compared to the complexity, but he's still considered a Pandit because the people who praise him don't know any better. Like that's what it means.
Is that what you think of when you hear like a devotee scholar? Is that the immediate thing you think of?
That impression's there, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Now imagine someone like this. You see somebody who is regulated, disciplined, simple-hearted, and somebody who's just fixed in services. Would you consider such a person to be a real scholar? No. This is what Krishna is saying is the person who's really armed with knowledge. Because knowledge does not here refer to the ability to quote many scriptures. Knowledge here refers to intellectual conviction and resultant action. If one is not acting in line with that knowledge, one is not considered to have that knowledge. The person who really has knowledge is somebody who is simple, who is gentle, who is humble. And yet when they speak, you will see wisdom, application, and learning in their words. You will see that this person is situated generally in the mode of goodness, and they are focused on the things that they do. They are focused in their duties. They appear to have all the time in the world. They're not running about here and there in passion. They're not espousing complicated philosophy all the time necessarily. But they are peaceful, generally, internally, externally, focused, and present in their services. Yet they get so much work done. They're always active. They're not lethargic, sleepy, passionate, in the sense of, like running around here and there, or they don't even appear like they're in a hurry. Such a person, you look for those qualities and you will actually see a person in knowledge. Does this feel like a reversal of a conception? If you had to go to two people to learn scripture, one, sitting, as some of the Vaishnavas have said, in front of a mountain of books or a big bookshelf, sitting with glasses and able to quote in and out of scripture. Or one can go to somebody who's fixed in their services, who lives a very simple life, who is a very simple-hearted, gentle and humble individual, yet their words carry wisdom. Generally, our preference is to go for the first category because we want information. But the real person actually who can give us knowledge is the latter. And so therefore, it's amazing that Krishna here says that tasmad ajnana sambhutam hritam jnana sinatmanaha. This born out of ignorance, doubt, cut it, slash it with the sword of knowledge. Situate yourself properly in knowledge. Situate yourself properly in the mode of goodness. Situate yourself properly in your services and your duties. Don't waver. And uttishta, stand up and show the world that you actually are a person in knowledge. That's what's indicated by this phrase, and that's why this verse is so powerful. Any questions?
Rosie, can I just, I remember one incident,
Yeah.
if you permit me, Rosie.
Please.
So when Srila Prabhupada, someone actually took one person to Prabhupada and say that Srila Prabhupada, he can read Srimad Bhagavad-gītā in 45 minutes or something like that. That's something, he read Bhagavad-gītā entirely and he got the full knowledge. And the Prabhupada said that, okay, take him to the kitchen and give some service. So what Prabhupada is trying to say here is he's not getting knowledge, book knowledge, rather to do some practical service.
Well, it's not, yeah. I mean, that phrase can sometimes be a little abused in ISKCON. Previously, they would just say, somebody who's working a lot is properly situated, and it means that you should not understand these points. But what I more mean to say is you will see it in the person's qualities and in their character. How many of us have, by the way, driven a car like really quickly, like on a road rage type thing? with as simple a thing as how a person drives a car, you can catch what's in their consciousness. I would drive the car very fast. I just love to do so. And I'd be driving like this. And my father would say, you don't actually realize what you're reading. And I would say, what do you mean? And then my father would say, you're just driving in passion. I can see the passion coming out of your system. Your mind and senses are not in your control. Otherwise, why on earth would you be driving like this? Why would you leave things to the last minute? Why would you just rush to cram everything in? Why would you be driving in such a rage? Ganesham Prabhu used to tell me, if I see how a person is sweeping the temple room, I can catch exactly what's in their mind. I can tell you what they're thinking about. I can tell you what their consciousness is focused on. And I can tell you how their chanting is. It's a really, really deep statement. You can see how a person eats, what a person eats, how a person speaks, how a person dresses, conducts themselves. And by that, you can tell the modes of nature that govern that individual. And therefore, you can tell whether that person is actually in knowledge or not. Whether one can espouse a lot of philosophy or not is not a very impressive thing. Everybody here is intelligent. If everybody applies themselves, they can become scholars in Vedic literature. That's not the issue. The actual issue is, does your character, does our character, does my character show that I actually have knowledge and application of that knowledge? That's what's indicated in this verse. Okay. Was chapter 4 relishable? Or did it feel overly theoretical? Yes, no? Please say something.
It feels like chapter 4 is a bit of like at the start, it felt like a bit of a detour, but towards the end, it felt like once you read the chapter, it felt like, oh yeah, it does fit here. It does feel, it's not a detour.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, the first part of the chapter is certainly like a very special detour. It's like a drop of nectar in, you can say it's almost like a rasgulla in a plate of khichdi. The khichdi is nice, but the rasgulla is something special. Yeah. It belongs actually to the same category as the middle 6 chapters. It doesn't belong to the first 6 chapters. But the instructions are actually quite important. There are some obscure verses in between which speak about different prescribed duties, for example. And it feels like a little weird. Who's the one who controls his breath going in and going out? There are some details there, but the principles are actually, I think, clear. Okay, chapter 5. Is everybody okay to go on? Another 15, 20 minutes? Actually, I promised Toshin Krishna Prabhu that I would cover up to verse 19 in the 5th chapter. Let's see how much. That's not going to happen, but let's at least give it a start. Would everybody like a quick 1-minute break before we start? Or yeah, okay, please get up, stretch, take a glass of water, bathroom. Please come back in 2-3 minutes. Hare Krishna. Is everyone back? Good. Is everyone else back, or is anybody away? Vidhi, Shivam, Nicole, Tarun Prabhu, Shavina Mataji. Is everybody here?
Back, Prabhu.
Okay, good. So let's get started. The title for chapter 5 in Sanskrit is called Karma Sannyasa Yoga. Now, the intention of this chapter is actually very, very specific. And I want to share with you one particular image. Hang on. Can everybody see what's on the screen? Yeah. So what you will note here is that one who is fed up with material life, as Arjuna was, comes and approaches a spiritual master for knowledge. When they achieve spiritual knowledge, they're given the practice of Nishkama Karma Yoga to purify the heart. At some stage, they awaken their inherent spiritual knowledge. They have significantly purified this misconception of I and mine. And they are on the platform of 317. And that's the basic platform from which chapter 5 starts. So Atma Ratir eva syat Atma triptas chamanava Atman eva cha santushtas tasya karyam na vidyate. They're at the stage where they have transcended their material designations to a large degree. And for such a person, they no longer generally need to continue to work in this world any longer. At that time, they have a choice. They can continue practicing Nishkama Karma Yoga for further purification, or they can go to Jnana Yoga. So I've called this stage the advanced practitioner. So aspiring practitioner, initially their I and mind is connected to the material body. Then you have the advanced practitioner, where there's a significantly purified conception of I and mind. They still need to go a little bit further until they can actually perfect their position using Dhyana Yoga, as mentioned in the 6th chapter. That happens when work becomes an obstacle to their continued advancement. Does anybody remember this from the last time? I think we were discussing the introduction to the 3rd chapter. So at this initial stage in the middle, when the person has transcended the material designations, but work has not yet become an obstacle, they actually need to be purified for a little bit longer before they become qualified to meditate upon Paramatma within their heart, which is the actual recommended conclusion to this process. Nishkama Karma Yoga purifies the heart and allows them to transcend their material designations. It awakens their inherent knowledge. But then Dhyana Yoga is required to completely awaken their spiritual nature, realize Brahman, and appreciate Paramatma's presence in everything in this world. So this transition from purification of heart to completely awakening one's spiritual nature is the topic of the 5th chapter of the Gita. And Krishna's recommendation is very, very clear. He says, Arjuna, don't go to Jnana Yoga. This chapter is titled Karma Sannyasa Yoga. The phrase karma here refers to Nishkama Karma. The phrase sannyasa refers to Jnana Yoga. Practices beginning with renunciation and engaging in an abstract form of meditation upon the Lord. What Krishna wants to tell Arjuna is, in this chapter, karma equals sannyasa. Nishkama Karma Yoga equals Jnana Yoga. So at this stage, you don't need Jnana Yoga. It's a risky practice. It is not required. You can continue to purify your heart using Nishkama Karma Yoga until your work becomes an obstacle. At that point, you give up your work and engage in Ashtanga Yoga with meditation upon my form directly within your heart. It's no longer the abstract meditation of Jnana Yoga. It is the direct meditation upon my form as Paramatma within your heart. And at that stage, you can give up your prescribed duties, go into seclusion, focus on meditating upon my form as Paramatma. You will realize completely that you're a spirit soul. You will realize my presence as Brahman everywhere. You will realize my presence as Paramatma in everybody's heart. Is this point clear? What's happening in the 5th chapter? So, chapter 5 then can naturally be broken into 5 sections. And here are the 5 sections here. So the last verses, and I'll start from the end, verses 27 to 29. The final rungs of this process started in the 2nd chapter of the Gita, and spanning those entire 5 chapters are described. And those final rungs are Dhyana Yoga, meditation upon Paramatma within the heart. Some people think that Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga are different processes. This is not true. It is one entire continuous process with 2 separate components. The first component, and I'm going back to this image, is a focus on running away from Maya, which is the purification of one's material identity. That's the Nishkama Karma Yoga part. The second part is the focus on establishing one's eternal nature. And that's the Dhyana Yoga part. Sometimes it overlaps with the Jnana Yoga part. Actually, there's a third component, and I'll explain that later. But the third component is, after one has become liberated within this world, a Jivan Mukta, one gives up karma, jnana, yoga, everything, and just engages in bhakti while waiting to merge into Brahman. This is not mentioned in the 6th chapter directly, but it is mentioned in the 18th chapter, beginning with the verses Brahmabhuta Prashanatma and the following verse. That's 1854 and 1855. So here are the 5 sections. Verses 27 and 29 speak about Dhyana Yoga. At that stage, Krishna says, okay, give up your duties and meditate upon my form as Paramatma. These instructions are elaborated in the 6th chapter. Now, going back to the beginning, in verses 1 through to 7, Krishna tells Arjuna that the advanced practitioner should continue to perform Nishkama Karma Yoga. The advantage of Nishkama Karma and the disadvantage of Jnana Yoga is discussed. In verses 8 through to 14, this is the 2nd section, Krishna shows Arjuna that even for the advanced practitioner, Nishkama Karma Yoga is equivalent to Jnana. So verses 1 to 7, the advantage of Nishkama Karma, the disadvantage of Jnana is mentioned. In 8 through to 14, the equivalence of both is spoken of or elaborated upon in those verses. In verses 15 through to 19, the importance of this practitioner meditating upon Paramatma's quality of impartiality is mentioned. This is identical to the instructions given in 4:13 to 4:15. I think we discussed this in the beginning of this class. Because it is only by understanding the transcendental nature of the Lord can any practitioner achieve transcendence. It's almost like, has anybody like caught on to like bars and pulled themselves up? Only by appreciating the transcendental nature of the Lord. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says actually, that when you appreciate the transcendental nature of the Lord, only then can you appreciate that Krishna as that original personality of Godhead, he is the one who is the actual doer. He is the one who's giving me the inspiration to act in this world. And only through such meditation or such recognition can one genuinely give up the sense that I am the doer here. That sense of that focus on the self is one can give up. And so therefore, meditation upon Paramatma's quality of impartiality is mentioned in these verses. Finally, in verses 20 to 26, the qualities of one situated in fixed realization. This is similar to the Siddha Pragya section is described. This person has not yet achieved perfection in practice, but they are almost ready to take on the final rungs, or they're ready to embark upon Dhyana Yoga. The qualities of that person are mentioned. And then finally, 27 to 29, it describes those final rungs, describes the practices to meditate upon the form of Paramatma and perfect one's practice. These are the 5 sections. Would it be helpful if I just copy pasted this in the chat or something? Oh, it doesn't allow me to copy paste anything. Okay, I'm just going to copy this to somebody. Mrugank, I'm just going to copy this to you. Just post it somewhere. Okay. Now, let's go through the verses. Is anybody curious, by the way, of what Jnana Yoga is? Does anybody wish to know? I won't go through this in detail. I'll just paste another section here. Just paste something, hang on. Mrugank, I'm just sending this to you as well. Devotees can read this in their own time. So Mrugank, I've just sent you something. That bit of text, if devotees read, they'll understand what Jnana Yoga is and how why it is not recommended, why Krishna doesn't recommend it. Okay, so chapter 5, text 1. Arjuna hovacha sanyasam karmanam Krishna punar yogam cha samshasi yat shreya etayorekam tanme bruhi sunishchitam. Translation.
Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, and then again, you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me which definition of the two is more beneficial?"
So one has to appreciate the statement in the context of the verses that have been spoken. So see, in the last verse, Krishna has said, Atishta Uttishta Bharata, armed with this knowledge, fight. And then if you go to 433, the phrase is said that all sacrifices ultimately, Sarvam Jnanam Akilam Partha Jnane Parisamapyate, that all activities ultimately culminate in knowledge. The word parisamapyate indicates that that activities are finished when you acquire knowledge. And so therefore Arjuna is kind of a little bit confused. He's wondering, and you'll notice that this question is identical, practically speaking, to text 3.1. So in text 3.1, Arjuna says, let me just open it up. He says, "Why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruit of work?" And then Arjuna says, "Oh Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, like with phrases like Jnane Parisamapyate. And then again, you recommend work with devotion. So the phrase is Punar Yogam cha Samshasi, meaning you engage in your prescribed duties with intention to please Krishna. Now, will you kindly tell me which of these two is more beneficial?" And implicitly, it's understood. Arjuna understands that at the beginning, he can't possibly give up work. That has already been explained by Krishna in the beginning of the 3rd chapter. Krishna has told Arjuna that in the beginning, you're forced to act according to your modes of material nature. But he has also told Arjuna, thank you, Rohan Prabhu. I'm sorry that I'm just continuing on for just a little bit. I'll finish in another 4 minutes or so. But he's also told Arjuna that when you attain a taste for Atma, as in 3:17, you can transcend. There are no prescribed duties recommended any longer. And he's also told him that ultimately all work culminates in knowledge. So Arjuna's question is, Krishna, I get that in the beginning I have to work, but what if I have some knowledge also? I'm confused. Are you telling me that I should continue with knowledge and just focus on meditating upon you in an abstract way? Or that I actually still need to perform my prescribed duties and connect them to you? So sannyasam karmanam Krishna, you're telling me to give up prescribed duties with phrases like jnane parisamapyate, punar yogam cha samshasi, artishta uttishta bharata. Fixed in this knowledge, get up and fight. Yat shreya etayor ekam, of these two, which is actually more beneficial? Tanme bruhi sunishchitam. Tell me certainly which of these two is more beneficial. Okay, so text number 2. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Sannyasa Karma Yogascha Nishreyasa Karavubhav Tayostu Karma Sannyasat Karma Yogo Vishishyate. Translation.
The personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work.
So Krishna here says that they're both good. Sannyasa karma yogascha nishreyasya kara ubhav. They're both capable of leading one to perfection. Tayostu karma sannyasat. But among the two, rather than karma sannyasa, giving up prescribed duties and then engaging in jnana yoga to meditate on the Lord in abstraction, karma yoga vishishyate, performing prescribed duties for the pleasure of the Lord, is recommended. Text number 3. Neya sanitya sannyasi yo na dveshti na kangshati nirdvandvo hi mahabaho sukham bhandat pramuchyate. Translation.
One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated. O mighty armed Arjuna.
So this verse explains why, the first reason as to why Nishkama Karma Yoga is superior to Jnana Yoga. And that's found in the phrase Sukham Bandhat Pramuchyate. The reason is this, that the senses are capable of going both inwards and outwards. Generally speaking, the natural function of the senses is to engage them in activities. Jnana Yoga requires stopping the forces of the senses and pushing it inwards. And this is complete torture. It is also very, very risky because you don't know when something will snap and go in the other direction. So the phrase Sukham Bandhat Pramuchyate, they're both good. They're both capable of leading one to perfection. But of the two, Nishkama Karma Yoga, it engages the senses in their natural way. You're engaging in your prescribed duties without attachment, and you're able to connect it to the Lord. So there's no connection with matter. Your heart is continuing to be purified, and it is easy to do. It is very natural for you to do. Whereas Jnana Yoga will require going opposite to the nature of the senses. And so therefore, it is not recommended because it's more risky. The chance of falling down is higher. The point is also this, once one gives up prescribed duties, sorry, give me 1 second. Once one gives up prescribed duties, meaning once one takes sannyas, how easy is it to come back and say, I'm so sorry I took sannyas and gave you up. Can you please take me back? It's actually really hard. It's not possible to come back. You're burning your bridges and going somewhere else. Whereas in Nishkama Karma Yoga, suppose you again develop some level of attachment. you can continue doing what you're doing and continue to purify your heart. So the problem with taking sannyas is that it's a harder path, and the risk of developing attachment and falling down is higher. With nothing, you can't fall back on anything else. That's the problem. So therefore the phrase used is sukham bandhat pramachyate. And the first 3 lines of text number 3, they emphasize how Nishkama Karma Yoga, it's not by any stretch of the imagination a lower pedestal. It is identical to, at least identical to Jnana Yoga, and it is easier to perform, so it's better. Neya sa nitya sannyasi. So the phrase is that this person who is in knowledge, the word neya indicates who's working in knowledge. He is a nitya sannyasi. Externally, he may not be wearing saffron, but he is actually a sannyasi. And yona dveshti na kankshati. His situation is that he neither has attachment nor aversion to this world. He is situated and shama in a state of equilibrium, meaning that he's basically a sannyasi. Nirdvandva. He's not affected by duality. He mahabaho. Sukham bandha. Then very easily he's able to purify his heart. Text number 4. Sankhya yoga pritagbala pravadanti na panditaha ekam api astita samyag ubahyor vindate phalam. Translation.
Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, karma yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both. Thank you, Prabhuji.
So this verse says that those who consider Sankhya Yoga, or the path of sannyasa or liberation, is superior, that person is a child, a bala. He is ignorant. Pravadanti na pandita. Learned people never speak in this way. They know that if you dedicate yourself to one of these 2 paths, any one of these 2 paths, according to your position, you will achieve perfection. Upayor vindate phalam. We're almost done. I was hoping to finish until text number 7, if that's okay. Was that okay for everyone? Or is that a problem? We'll finish in the next 2 to 3 minutes. Text 5. Yat sankhye prapyate sthanam tad yoge rapi gamyate ekam sankyam cha yogam cha ya pashyati sapashyati. Translation.
One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are.
Yeah. So this is a follow-on and an elaboration of the previous verse. Yat sankhye prapyate sthanam tad yoge rapi gamyate. Whatever sthanam, position one can attain by sankhya or through the process of jnana yoga, tad yoge rapi, even through the practice of nishkama karma yoga, gamyate, one can attain. Ekam sankyam cha yogam cha. One who's seeing both processes as identical, meaning one who sees that within the womb of Nishkama Karma Yoga, you have Jnana Yoga. Yah pashyati, one who sees this, sa pashyati, he actually sees things and understands things as they are. Text number 6. Sannyasastu mahabaho dukkam aptam ayogataha yoga yukto munir brahma nachire nadigacchati. Translation.
Merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay.
So this is identical to verse number 3, where Nishkama Karma Yoga was called Sukham, and this here, the Dukkham of Jnana Yoga is emphasized. Sannyasas tu mahabaho dukkam aptum ayogataha. It is, if one engages purely in Jnana Yoga, one has to face suffering. And this suffering has to do with the restriction one has to place in the senses. This is identical, by the way, to the verse 12.5. It should be read in conjunction with 12.5, where Krishna says that with great difficulty, one can practice this impersonalistic process. Krishna says. Sannyasasta mahabadugam aptama yoga, the yoga yukta munir brahma na achirena digachati. One engages in Nishkama karma yoga without delay. If one properly engages it, Brahma, the Supreme Lord, in the form of impersonal realization of Brahma, can be very easily achieved. That's indicated in text number 6. So the final verse of this first section of the 5th chapter. And this verse reveals the second of the 2 reasons as to why Krishna is not recommending Jnana Yoga over the continued practice of Nishkama Karma Yoga for the advanced practitioner. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyaha sarva bhutatma bhutatma kurvan api na lipyate. Translation.
One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Thank you, Prabhu.
So this person, Vishuddha Atma, he is a purified soul. He no longer identifies with matter. He is situated in his Atma. And so this verse should be read in conjunction with 3.17. Yasva Atma Ratireva Syad Atma Triptascha Manava. Vijit Atma, he has conquered his mind. Jitendriya, he has conquered and is controlling his senses. What this means is that this person works with no personal motivation. He works only out of a sense of duty and service to others. If such a person is an administrator, the only reason he's doing something is so that others are benefited. The only reason that he is talking to somebody is for their advancement and their benefit. Otherwise, he's got nothing to say. There's no personal motivation that he has. When a person is so selfless in the way that he or she works, that person becomes very, very dear to others. And that's expressed in the 3rd line. Sarva bhutatma bhutatma. Everyone is dear to him and he is dear to everyone. Now, when somebody becomes dear to people in general, by the way, this is also said of the Goswamis. You know which line says this? Dhira dhira jana priya priya karao nirmatsarao pujitao. The Goswamis were completely non-envious. They had no personal motivation. They wanted the best for everybody else. They were not thinking that somebody else should lose out because I need to gain. And so dhira adhira jana priyakara. They were dear to both the dhiras and adhiras, those who were devotees and even other envious people around the world who didn't appreciate Krishna, but they appreciated the Goswamis because they just worked for everybody. When somebody is dear to everybody, what is the natural consequence? From the bottom of their heart, what kind of feeling comes towards oneself?
Compassion.
Compassion. Compassion means you're giving. It's a form of affection shown towards somebody situated lower than oneself. But this person is not in need of general people's compassion.
Trust.
Trust. Affection.
Affection.
The word I was looking for was blessings. From the bottom of the heart, may he live 100 years. Isn't that true? May this person, like if somebody's a very good leader, very good administrator, you think, may he always be there. May his service continue for 100 years, you say. So from the bottom of people's heart, you get blessings. And this is the second important difference between Jnana Yoga and Nishkama Karma Yoga. When one engages as an advanced practitioner in Nishkama Karma Yoga and genuinely performs one's duties for the benefit of others, to set an example for others, one gets the blessings of others. And in that way, one's purification is faster than in Jnana Yoga, which is isolated, focused only on oneself, is not involved in serving others selflessly. So Sarva Bhutatma, that's the importance of that phrase. Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma Kurvan Apina Lupita. And whatever he does, of course, he's not implicated. So there are two reasons mentioned in these 7 verses. The first one is Sukham Bandhat Pramuchate. That this Nishkama Karma Yoga, there's no risk. You continue engaging in this process as an advanced practitioner. There's no risk. It's identical in its purificatory ability. And even if there's fall down, you can carry on. And number 2, you get the blessings of everybody else involved. And therefore your progress is faster. So you can see that Krishna is very strongly dissuading Arjuna from Jnana Yoga. I know I've gone well over time. I'm really sorry. But if the Vaishnavas have any questions, please feel free to stay on. I can stay on for as long as there are questions. Otherwise, it's really wonderful to have your association again. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Bhagavad-gītā ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.